Driving toward Cologne, 28th February, 1st Army Divisions attacked the heavily defended Erft River. Following up their victorious breakthrough at Düren, men in tanks of Lieutenant General Courtney Hodges' army conquer more towns on the Cologne plain, raising their total to more than 100 since the start of the offensive on the 23rd of February. Approaching the Erft water barrier on a 14-mile front along the main highway from Düren, resistance stiffens. Enemy rear guards take advantage of well-concealed positions inside the town, and enemy artillery fire zeroes in on the roads leading eastward to the Rhine. Contrary to Hitlerite propaganda, our troops did not encounter fanatical resistance from the civilian population, of which Goebbels had boasted. Once the enemy troops were beaten, the fight ended. With the 1st and 9th U.S. Armies moving up to the Rhine in parallel drives, Schaeff reported that they faced the battered 15th German Army, comprising 6 weak infantry divisions and 2 Panzer Divisions brought up piecemeal from the south. By 28th February, the 9th Panzer Division, thrown against the Cologne advance, had already lost the best part of its grenadier battalions. In spite of these losses, the enemy, aided by bad weather which prevented maximum effectiveness of our Air Force, conducted a well-planned withdrawal. On secondary roads outside of Freutzheim, our columns are halted by extensive minefields. One of our tanks, knocked out by a mine, temporarily impedes the advance as a mine detector team clears the narrow route. Brushing aside enemy rear guards, our troops breach the Erft River near Glesch on the 1st of March. The river, which forms a natural arc around the city of Cologne, flows northward and joins the Rhine opposite Düsseldorf. Standing midway between the Ruhr and the Rhine, the Erft River is the foundation of the German secondary defense line in the Cologne plain. The river is paralleled by a canal, as well as by tributary streams. In some places, 1st Army engineers were forced to construct 3 successive spans before our columns could begin the final phase of the Cologne advance. With the crossing of the Erft achieved, the enemy frantically stepped up the tempo of his withdrawal across the Rhine, as our Air Force pounded at fleeing columns and still standing bridges along that main water artery. Establishing bridgeheads on the eastern bank on a front between Findorf and Modrath, men of the 8th Infantry Division, supported by tanks, run into stiff fighting as they gain control of the main highway leading to Cologne. A well-hidden machine gun opens up on our troops moving into Glesch. The doughboys crawl to the protection of the nearest house. A tank officer orders a tank to move into the line of fire as a partial screen for the infantry. Advancing 4 kilometers east of the Erft, 1st Army troops reach industrial towns only 6.5 miles from Cologne. Civilian affairs authorities rounded up civilians at various centers, hunting Nazi soldiers reported to have changed into civilian garb. Others gathered for questioning included members of Hitler's uniformless Volkssturm units. At one of these centers, the people had a grandstand seat on the 1st Army's race to Cologne, an event which they watched without cheers or boos, in a completely passive mood. Crossing the Erft Canal a few miles to the north, men of the 104th Infantry Division and supporting tanks launch an attack leading to the rail center of Harum. New T-26 tanks take part in the action. Passing a knocked-out Jerry armored vehicle, as 1st Army registered gains toward the outskirts of Cologne's 2nd march. Taking the rail center of Harum, 104th Infantry troops march eastward after overcoming bitter fighting from the enemy holed up in lignite mine pits and hidden in factories and other industrial buildings. While advance columns pushed into Pulheim, other 1st Army divisions cleared Modrath on the main highway to Cologne, while to the south, on roads leading to Bonn, 1st Infantry Division troops clear Auen and other towns in the neighborhood of Euskirchen. Reaching the outskirts of the city, east of Pulheim, our columns swing on Cologne from 3 directions, with the 3rd Armored striking from the northwest, while 104th Infantry surge in frontally from the west, and 9th Armored clears sections southwest of the city in conjunction with the 9th Infantry. Capturing Köln-Bickendorf, a suburban tramway junction 3 miles from the city. Meeting SP and ack fire, our troops gather in an assortment of civilians and third-rate troops, many of them grounded Luftwaffe personnel. White flags flew in the suburbs, which were found to be densely populated as a result of air wreckage to the center of the city. There were few signs of a house-to-house battle as our tanks moved in toward Cologne, and our soldiers guided civilians into air raid shelters, protecting them from the sporadic fire splattering over the streets. These civilians, carrying white flags, showed no outward hostility to our men, now ready for the final assault on Germany's 4th largest city. After advancing east from the Ruhr River line, on the Hitler-built express highway from Aachen through Düren and Harum, troops of the 1st United States Army enter the city of Cologne at 0900 hours, 5th March. Supported by tanks and tank destroyers, doughboys of the 104th Infantry Division are the first to cross the city limits, within plain view of the historic cathedral in the ancient part of one of Europe's most beautiful cities. As the final push begins, enemy anti-tank fire opens up, and the guns on our tanks crack back. With the guns roaring overhead, infantry duck under enemy fire to wipe out the well-hidden but weakly defended enemy positions. Instead of strong house-to-house fight expected in Cologne, whose devastated streets had been compared to Stalingrad, the Germans employed a defense system of key houses. They held one house until flushed out, then withdrew to another a few blocks beyond and repeat. In pursuit of German columns fleeing at a highway intersection, prisoners and trolley car officials are rounded up as our spearheads are held up by a collection of trams underneath a railroad crossing. This road obstacle was the only planned barrier encountered by our troops as they drove into the city. The enemy apparently had no time in his retreat to block the main roads into Cologne. Tanks of the 3rd Armored are on hand to haul the trams out of the way and effect a speedy passage. Major General Morris Rose's men put up a sign at the approaches to the city. And suburban citizens hang out their own welcome signs as well. While two divisions of the First Army pressed slowly into the blasted streets of Cologne, meeting only a light covering of fire, other elements of the First Army raced north and south of the city. The right flank pushed to the Rhine and swung north to come into contact with the Ninth Army. There, Allied troops held a continuous front on the Rhine from north of Cologne to Hamburg opposite Duisberg. Still further north, Ninth Army troops were joining with Canadian First Army men in squeezing enemy remnants into the bridge at Wessel, where the enemy was conducting a large-scale evacuation. South of the fighting in Cologne, other First Army divisions were racing for the university city of Bonn on the Rhine and the undestroyed railroad bridge at Remagen. Under these blows, German forces in the area were in full retreat across the Rhine bridges. Air reconnaissance reported that enemy vehicles were pressed bumper to bumper as they moved across the bridges. Typical Hitler weather, which had aided the enemy in the Ardennes, gave cover to these evacuations. Inside Cologne, with one bridge still spanning the Rhine, some vehicles occasionally sped by, attempting to reach the eastern bank. Most of the civilians followed General Eisenhower's advice and remained in deep shelters or stayed away from the fighting zones. Inevitably, some were caught. A woman driving an auto was one of those who did not make the bridge. Medical Corps men followed up the advance, setting up their aid stations in the least battered of the buildings. Most of their patients were wounded Reich soldiers, some of whom had fallen behind the retreat and hidden themselves away until they could surrender to our men. Surmounting the rubble, our tanks push on toward the cathedral and the old city, which stands only 100 yards from the Rhine River. There, the enemy garrison, supported by one Mark V tank, made the final stand for the city. Terrified by the roar of battle, an aged woman frantically seeks cover from Hitler's holy war for Nordic supremacy. Following the fighting to the shadows of the ancient cathedral, Signal Corps cameramen, Sergeants Rosenman, Bates, and Garrow, record the climactic tank battle for the city. Our leading tank is hit. The commander, his leg cut off, escapes from the burning tank to die a few moments later. Cutting in behind the hidden German tank, one of our T-26 tanks prepares to fire point blank on the enemy Mark V. The last enemy tank in the city is destroyed. Slowly the smoke rises to the top of the famous twin-spired dome, chipped, gouged, and scarred, but essentially still standing, as Cologne, fourth largest city in Germany, falls to American troops 6th of March. Devastation wrought by Allied bombing has laid waste the central part of the city, where once 800,000 people lived. All that made Cologne famous in history has been wiped out. Its 14th century town hall and its fish market on the bank of the Rhine stemming back to Roman times. Already bulldozers are at work on the edge of the Rhine in the task of rebuilding and restoring the civilization that the Hitler regime tried to destroy forever.